For 100 millennia, the galaxy had lived in the shadow of its own creation myth. The story was the same on every civilized world, from the crystalline spires of Ethenos to the sprawling logical megacities of the Cathal Ascendancy. In the beginning, there was the silence, and then there were the Firstborn. They were the first, the progenitors, the race that had, with casual divine grace, lit the fires of FTL travel, bent space-time to their will, and seeded the galaxy with the potential for life. They were known by a single, simple, and revered name: humanity. They were the parents of the cosmos, and like all parents, they had, at the crank apex of their power, vanished. They had not been defeated. There was no evidence of a great war, no cosmic plague. There was only the great silence, a day 100,000 years ago when their vast galaxy-spanning network of light and energy had simply and quietly gone dark. They left behind two things: their gifts and their tomb. The gifts were the scraps of their incomprehensible technology, the derelict FTL drives, the fragmented data cores, the dormant power systems found on 1,000 dead worlds. These relics were the bedrock of all modern galactic civilization. The younger races, the Cathal, the Ethan, the Velani, and a dozen others, had not invented faster-than-light travel. They had reverse-engineered it, clumsily, from the ghosts of a technology they still did not truly understand. Their entire, sprawling interstellar society was a cargo cult, a generation of children playing with their parents' forgotten and dangerously potent tools. The second thing they left was their tomb, the Sol system, the human cradle. It was surrounded by a perfect, shimmering, golden sphere of energy known as the quarantine. It was a flawless, impenetrable, and absolute barrier. The conclave of younger races, the unified political and religious body that governed the galaxy, revered it as a sacred memorial, a do-not-disturb sign of divine proportions. It was the holiest and most forbidden place in the universe. Captain Xyla of the Velani exploration vessel Pathfinder was not a religious woman. She was a scientist, a pragmatist, a creature of the wind-swept cliffs of her homeworld. Her avian-like, iridescent feathered form a stark contrast to the reverent, robed Cathal priests who so often dominated the conclave. Her ship was a machine of science, its purpose to hunt for new firstborn relics, to better understand the magic that powered their entire world. She was currently charting a dead sector, a place where firstborn energy signatures were rumored to be faint but present. Her bridge was quiet, her crew, a mix of logical Velani and meticulous insectoid Gnarl, at their stations. "Report," she chirped, her voice the clear, fluting note of her species. "Long-range augers are still anomalous, Captain." Her Gnarl sensor chief clicked, his multifaceted eyes swiveling. "The background radiation, it's not noise, it's a pattern, a repeating, structured, massive energy wave, but its point of origin is impossible." Xyla moved to his station, her sharp avian eyes scanning the data. The energy wave was not a new discovery. It was a phenomenon so old and so vast it was considered a law of nature, the cosmic hum, the leftover, fading echo of the Firstborn's ancient power grid. Except, "It's not fading," Xyla whispered, her feathers ruffling in a sudden cold dread. "Chief, analyze the amplitude. Run a 10-cycle diagnostic." The Gnarl's manipulators flew across the console. A new graph appeared. The hum, the energy wave that had been steadily, predictably decaying for 100,000 years, was not decaying. In the last 3 cycles, it had risen, it was growing louder, and its point of origin, the place the music was coming from, was the one, single, silent, sacred place in the galaxy. It was coming from the center of the Sol quarantine. The tomb was not dead. It was singing, and the song was getting louder. The news that Captain Xyla brought back to the conclave on Ethenos did not just cause a stir, it shattered the foundation of 100 millennia of galactic peace. The hum was not an echo, it was an engine, and it was warming up. The conclave chamber, A vast, crystalline sphere that chimed with the harmonious collective thoughts of a dozen species was now a discordant, panicked roar. "It is a sign!" A Cathal pontiff boomed, his voice a deep, resonant, and fearful chord. "The gods are stirring. They are returning to judge us. We must prepare for the great reckoning." "It is a decay," countered a Gnarl logician. "The quarantine is failing. It is a doomsday clock. The tomb is collapsing, and it is releasing a wave of forgotten ancient energy that will sterilize the quadrant. We must flee." Xyla, her small avian form a stark practical contrast to the robed mystics and shimmering energy beings, stood in the center of the chamber. "You are both wrong," she chirped, her voice cutting through the panic with the sharp, clear edge of view. "Pure applied science. It is not a return, and it is not a collapse. It is a protocol. I have analyzed the signal. The energy wave is not chaotic. It is a complex, structured mathematical sequence. It is a countdown, and it is, by my calculations, reaching its 0 point in less than one standard rotation." The panic in the chamber solidified into a new, cold, unified terror. A countdown. "To what?" "We cannot," Xyla continued, "sit here and wait for the answer. We cannot assume it is a judgment. We cannot assume it is a bomb. We must assume it is an invitation. I request the formation of the First Light Expedition, a fleet of our fastest, most advanced scientific vessels. We must be at the Sol quarantine. When that timer reaches 0, we must be there to observe. We are the children of their technology. It is time we finally, and bravely, met the parents." Her logic and her courage cut through the fear. The conclave, in a frantic, historic, and terrified vote, agreed. A fleet was assembled, a collection of the finest, fastest ships the younger races could muster. They were, in truth, clumsy, lumbering, reverse-engineered copies of the Firstborn's own ancient designs, but they were the best the galaxy had. Xyla was given command. Her fleet, the First Light, was not a war fleet. It was a scientific delegation, a diplomatic envoy, and if necessary, a sacrifice. They jumped, their FTL drives, crude, Firstborn copies, tearing a series of messy, asymmetrical holes in space-time, a frantic race to the cradle of the gods. They arrived at the edge of the Sol system, a safe, respectful 1 light-year distance from the quarantine. They arrived with 12 hours to spare. The vast, shimmering, golden sphere of the quarantine was vibrating. The hum was now a song, a deep, powerful bass note that was so strong. Xyla could feel it in the alloys of her own ship's hull. The countdown was almost over. The entire crew of the Pathfinder and the entire fleet watched their sensors, their hearts, their manipulators, and their various multifaceted eyes, all fixed on a single, impossible, beautiful, and terrifying point of golden light. "All hands," Xyla broadcast, her voice surprisingly steady. "We are now witnesses. Whatever happens, you will observe, you will record, you will remember." The chronometer on her main screen, synchronized to the Firstborn's countdown, ticked to its final impossible universe-shattering 0. The long morning protocol was a simple, elegant piece of code, buried in the deepest, most secure quantum-entangled matrix of the progenitor mainframe, designation Ariadne. It was a 100,000-year-long, repeating if-then command. If, galactic, energy signature, ambient chaos index rises above threshold kilo. And if, galactic technology signature, coherent FTL resonance is detected in more than 5,000 independent star systems. Then, initiate long morning protocol. Cycle duration, 100,000 years. Current status, complete. Deep beneath the scarlet frozen plains of Utopia Planitia on Mars in a cryo-vault the size of a modern human city, a single crystalline blue light turned from standby to active. Elias Thorne's consciousness returned not as a rush, but as a slow, cold, and methodical thaw. His first sensation, his first qualia in 100 millennia, was not of his body, but of data. He was, for a single, long, luxurious second, pure information, His mind linked to the Ariadne mainframe. He saw the galaxy. He saw the children, the younger races, the little, beautiful, chaotic, noisy civilizations that had sprung up from the genetic seeds his people had sown. He saw their clumsy, wonderful, reverse-engineered FTL drives, their messy, nascent, interstellar empires. He saw the Pathfinder, Captain Xyla's ship, a small, trembling, avian-designed vessel, sitting a light year away, pointed at his home, her sensors wide with a beautiful, terrified, primate-like curiosity. The experiment had worked. The fallow period was over. The garden, left untended, had, against all odds, bloomed. Initiate Phase 2, physical reintegration, he thought. The data stream ended, and the pain began. His consciousness was poured like liquid fire back into the flesh it had abandoned. He gasped. A dry, ragged 100,000-year-old breath, his lungs inflating. His heart, a strong, new, perfectly cloned organ, giving its first, powerful thump. He opened his eyes. He was floating in a warm, amber-colored bioregenerative fluid, his body pale and new, but his mind ancient. He was Warden-Primus Elias Thorne, and his long, long, long night of sleep was over. He unlatched his cryopod, the hibernation gel draining away, and stepped out onto the cold, metal Martian floor. The air was clean, recycled, and perfect. "Ariadne," he said, his voice a raw, unused croak. "Status." "Good morning, Warden-Primus," a calm, feminine, synthesized voice replied, echoing through the vast, white, awakening chamber. "The long morning protocol is at 98% completion. Vault Alpha is active. Reintegration of your command Triumvirate is underway. The quarantine seal of Sol is, as of 3.4 minutes ago, fully and permanently deactivated." "And the children?" Elias asked, as he pulled on the simple, functional gray uniform that had been laid out for him. "The younger races," Ariadne replied. "Designation: Velani, avian, Cathal, reptilian, Gnarl, insectoid, and 14 others are confirmed. They have formed a galactic conclave and have, as you predicted, reverse-engineered our Relic Alpha, FTL technology. A First Light fleet Velani led is currently at the system perimeter, holding a passive observational posture. They appear frightened." Elias allowed himself a small, thin, ancient smile. "Frightened is good. Frightened is respectful. It means they're smart enough to know what they don't know." He walked to the main hangar bay, a place the size of a small country where his ship, the Messenger, waited. It was a small, sleek, teardrop-shaped vessel of pure, seamless silver alloy. It was just a scout ship, a simple, run-of-the-mill progenitor diplomatic vessel. And it was, he knew, about to be the most terrifyingly advanced godlike machine the younger races had ever seen. He was joined by his Triumvirate, General Eva Rostova, head of defense, and Dr. Aris Thorne, head of xenosociology, their own, faces pale and new, their eyes ancient with the same long sleep. "Well," Elias said as the hangar doors, a mile high, began to slide open, revealing the faint, distant yellow star that was home. "The night is over. The children are awake. Let's go say good morning." Aboard the Pathfinder, the universe broke. The golden, shimmering, spherical wall of the quarantine did not explode. It did not shatter. It just dissolved. It was like a curtain of gold dust sprinkled on the black that was suddenly, gently, and completely blown away. The Pathfinder's bridge was a cacophony of alarms, not of warning, but of impossibility. "Captain!" The Gnarl. Sensor Chief shrieked, his antennae vibrating so fast they were a blur. "The system is open. The quarantine is gone. I am reading impossible energy signatures from the 3rd and 4th planets. They are active. They are godlike. The scale. It's..." The Gnarl, a creature of pure, hard logic, could not find a word. Xyla, her avian heart hammering, her feathers puffed out in a state of pure, primal, flight-or-fight terror, gripped her command chair. "All ships, hold. Formation. Do not advance, do not power weapons. We are guests here, we are..." children. She was the first to see it, a single tiny silver mote detaching itself from the red dot of the fourth planet, Mars. It moved with a speed that defied her sensors. It did not burn with engines, it did not tear a hole in space for FTL, it just moved, crossing the millions of miles from Mars to their position at the edge of the system in a matter of minutes. A journey that would have taken her own clumsy, advanced ships a week. It stopped, a respectful 100-kilometer distance, from her flagship, a single perfect seamless silver teardrop. It was a tiny ship, barely a scout, and Xyla knew, with a certainty that turned her bones to ice, that this one single tiny vessel could annihilate her entire 1,000-ship holy fleet without even raising its voice. "It is hailing us," the comms officer whispered, her own fluting, voice trembling. It is not using a language, it is Ariadne, the base code, the Firstborn's operating system. It is talking to our engines. Put it on. Put it on the main screen, Xyla commanded. The screen flickered, not with static, but with a wave of pure, clear, perfect data. The Pathfinder's crude, reverse-engineered, Firstborn-based computer system shuddered as it was for the first time in its existence spoken to by its creator. The screen cleared, and the god appeared. He was not a being of pure energy. He was not a crystalline giant. He was a progenitor, a human. He looked exactly like the ancient, holy, time-worn statues in the temples on Athenos. He was tall, bipedal, with a thin covering of hair on his head, his face a mask of pale skin, his eyes a sharp, intelligent, piercing blue. He was ancient, impossibly ancient, and yet he looked young. He was seated in a simple, gray, functional chair, his hands clasped before him. He was not smiling. He was analyzing. When he spoke, his voice was not a divine, booming chord. It was a calm, quiet baritone, and it was not in the Firstborn's forgotten tongue. He was speaking perfect, flawless, modern Velani. The Pathfinder's computer, in the milliseconds since the channel had opened, had been scanned, its entire linguistic database absorbed, analyzed, and learned by the Firstborn's ship. "Greetings," the god, Warden-Primus Elias Thorne said, his voice a simple, clear, and terrifyingly paternal sound. "The long night is over. The great silence, as your records call it, is at an end. We are the progenitors, your creators, the Firstborn, and this is the long morning." He paused, his blue eyes seeming to look at every single terrified member of Xyla's bridge crew. "We have been asleep. We left the galaxy to your care, to see what you would build from the seeds we planted. We are impressed. You have learned to travel. You have learned to cooperate. You have built a conclave. This is good." Xyla, her mind reeling, her entire pragmatic scientific worldview shattering and reforming around this single impossible man, found her voice. We are honored," she stammered, the formal religious greeting springing to her beak unbidden. "We are your children. We have come to welcome you." Elias Thorne's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened, just a fraction. "We appreciate the gesture, Captain Xyla of the Velani Pathfinder." The fact that he knew her name, her ship's name, sent a new wave of terror through her. "But we are not your gods. We are your ancestors, and we are not here to be welcomed. We are here to review. We have been asleep for 100,000 years. The galaxy, our galaxy, has been in your hands. You have built your entire interstellar civilization on the scraps of our old, obsolete, nursery room technology." He leaned forward, a single, simple, and utterly crushing gesture. "So, the long night is over. The adults are home. It is time for you to show us what you have learned." Xyla, the galaxy's foremost scientific mind, suddenly felt like a primitive, frightened and very, very small child who had just been caught playing with her father's fusion reactor and was now about to be graded. The messenger was not a large ship. By the standards of the younger races, it was barely a frigate, a tiny silver teardrop against the bulk of Xyla's flagship, the Pathfinder. Warden-Primus Thorne's voice, now a simple, standard frequency, radio signal that felt almost primitive after the power of his initial greeting, was calm. "Captain Xyla, we would be honored if you and your chief scientific officer would come aboard. We have much to discuss." It was an invitation, but it held the unassailable weight of a royal command. Xyla felt a ripple of fear pass through her bridge crew. She looked at Tikuk, her gnarl sensor chief, a being of pure, hard logic whose multifaceted eyes were swiveling in a clear state of analytical panic. "Captain," Tikuk clicked, his voice a low, distressed vibration. "The energy, readings from that object are not just high, they are a logical impossibility. I am detecting a stable, contained gravitational singularity. The ship is not being propelled by a drive. It is simply and continuously falling in a controlled direction. It is a Kugelblitz, a black hole generated from pure energy. Our most ancient sacred Firstborn texts describe such a thing, but only as a theoretical metaphor for the mind of God." Xyla steadied her own avian nerves, her iridescent feathers flattening in a gesture of forced calm. "Then we must be very polite, Chief." She opened the channel. "Warden-Primus Thorne, we accept your invitation with great honor." The messenger did not deploy a docking tube, a clumsy physical mechanical process. It simply moved closer, and a perfect circular section of the Pathfinder's own hull, a section that had never been a door, simply dissolved, its molecules temporarily unwoven. It was replaced by a seamless, shimmering tunnel of hard light that connected their bridge to the Firstborn vessel. It was not a docking, it was an edit. The aliens had rewritten a piece of her ship's physical reality, as casually as one might open a curtain. She and Tikuk stepped through the shimmering tunnel, their feet touching the floor of the Firstborn ship. The interior was not the grand, crystalline cathedral the Cathal scriptures had promised. It was simple. It was a small circular room, its walls a seamless, matte white material that seemed to drink the light, giving off a soft, ambient, sourceless glow. There were no visible controls, no consoles, no wires. There were just 3 simple gray functional chairs, and the 3 progenitors. Elias Thorne, the Warden-Primus, sat in the center. He was flanked by the 2 others from his Triumvirate, a woman with sharp dark eyes and an aura of coiled, dangerous energy, and a man with a softer, more analytical gaze. All 3 wore the same simple, unadorned gray uniforms. They were not gods. They were not kings. They looked to Xyla's sudden, horrified realization like academics or engineers. They looked like professionals, and that somehow was infinitely more terrifying. "Welcome aboard the messenger," Thorne said, his Velani still perfect. "This is General Eva Rostova of our Defense Triumvirate, and Dr. Aris Thorne of our Xenosociology Triumvirate." Tikuk, the Gnarl, was practically vibrating, his antennae twitching as he scanned the room with his own organic sensors. The power," he clicked, unable to contain his scientific ecstasy. "The K-drive, the singularity, it is beautiful. But where is the containment, the shielding, the energy required to stabilize such a thing? It would take a star." Dr. Aris Thorne, the sociologist, smiled, a warm paternal expression that was deeply unsettling. "Oh, the K-drive," he said, his voice kind. "Goodness, no, that's just the auxiliary reactor, for the inertial dampeners and the lights. Ariadne, our ship's intelligence, likes the stability." He gestured to the floor at a small silver sphere, no larger than Xyla's head, that was humming with a faint low-frequency sound. "That's the main drive. It's a 0-point manifold, standard issue, really. It just taps the quantum foam. A bit noisy, I'm afraid, but it's reliable." Talk made a small, choking sound. A 0-point manifold, a perpetual energy device that tapped the fabric of the universe itself. It was a myth, a bedtime story for physicists, and these beings used it as a car engine. Xyla, desperate to regain some footing, pointed at a vast, perfect holographic map of the galaxy that had just shimmered into existence on the far wall. It was not a chart. It was real time. She could see the signature of her own fleet and the faint, angry, red-flashing icons of the Cathal fleet massing back in the core systems. "Your sensors," she whispered. "They are galactic." General Eva Rostova, the woman with the sharp eyes, spoke for the first time. Her voice was like iron. "Ariadne is not a sensor, Captain. She is a quantum-entangled, non-local intelligence. She is not scanning the galaxy. She is experiencing it. We do not detect the Cathal fleet, we watch them. We see the High Pontiff Vale in his chambers. We hear his prayers. We are analyzing the metallurgical stress fractures on his flagship's drive plate." She tapped the air, and a small, magnified holographic window appeared, showing a real-time molecular-level scan of the Cathal flagship's engine. "He is, by the way, preparing for war." Xyla's feathers ruffled so violently she felt she might molt. The Firstborn were not just advanced, they were panopticons. They were a civilization that had transcended the very concept of privacy. The technological gap was not a chasm. It was a different dimension. She and her people were not just children with sticks. They were bacteria in a petri dish, and the scientists had just returned to the lab. The First Light Fleet returned to the conclave on Ethenos in a state of shattered, reverent, and terrified silence. The 1 light-year journey, which had taken them 2 weeks of frantic, high-risk chain-jumping with their crude FTL drives, was accomplished in 20 minutes courtesy of the messenger. The Firstborn ship had simply opened a stable, perfect FTL corridor for them, a road through subspace, and had gently nudged them down it. It was like a parent, tired of watching. Their child crawl had simply picked them up and carried them to their room. Captain Xyla, now the de facto ambassador to the most powerful beings in history, found herself standing once more in the great crystalline chamber of the conclave, which was now packed with the holographic representations of 1,000 worlds, all vibrating with a single, unified, panicked question. She gave her report. She spoke of the messenger. She spoke of the Kugelblitz, the zero-point manifold, the real-time galactic sensor grid. She spoke of the fact that the progenitors knew their names, their ship's stress fractures, and by implication, their every single hidden thought. And then she spoke the final, terrible truth. "They are not gods," she chirped, her voice echoing in the sudden, profound silence. "They are not divine beings of pure energy as the litany describes. They are flesh. They are biological. They are progenitors. They are the humans of the ancient texts. And they are, exactly as the statues depict, the conclave, which had been unified in its terror, now fractured. The Gnarl, the logical insectoids, were vibrating with a new, frantic intellectual ecstasy. 1,000,000 years. The data. The science we must learn. The Velani, Xyla's own people, were cautious, afraid, but hopeful. They were, after all, parents themselves. But the Cathal were furious. High Pontiff Vale, his massive reptilian form radiating a dark crimson aura, slammed his ceremonial staff onto the floor. "Blasphemy," he roared, his voice a tidal wave of pure religious rage. "You have been deceived, Captain Xyla, tricked by an impostor." "Holiness, I saw them," Xyla began. "You saw flesh," Vial shouted. "You saw apes. The Firstborn are divine. They are pure. They ascended. They did not put themselves to sleep in a box of meat on Mars. These things, they are biological remnants. They are squatters. They are heretics who have stolen the holy relics of the cradle and are now in their arrogance claiming to be the gods themselves. This is a test of our faith. It is the great lie foretold in the 7th verse of the Vacor." The Cathal delegation, a full quarter of the conclave, flared their own auras in crimson agreement. The chamber descended into a chaos of accusation and counter-accusation. A new figure appeared on the main dais. It was not a hologram. It was Elias Thorne. He had used the messenger's internal transport system, a matter converter, to simply beam himself from his ship, still in the Sol system, directly into the heart of their most sacred and supposedly most secure chamber. The guards, the mighty 8-foot-tall Cathal honor guard, did not even have time to raise their lances. They were frozen, not by a weapon, but by a localized stasis field, their bodies locked in mid-motion. The entire chaotic, screaming chamber was struck dead silent. Thorne, in his simple gray functional uniform, walked calmly to the center of the dais. He looked at the frozen, furious holographic face of High Pontiff Vale. "Your 7th verse of the Vakor," Thorne said, his voice calm, clear, and amplified by the chamber's own acoustic system, which Ariadne had, of course, already commandeered, "is a 50,000-year-old mistranslation of one of our relic alpha engineering manifests. You are not reading a prophecy. You are reading a parts list for a terraforming engine's catalyst injector. Your faith, Pontiff, is built on a typo." He turned to the entire stunned, silent assembly. "We are not your gods. We are not imposters. We are your engineers, and we have awakened to find that our nursery has become a very loud, very superstitious, and very dangerous place. This bickering," he said, his voice hardening, "is disappointing, and it will stop. Now." Warden-Primus Thorne did not wait for an argument. He was a scientist, an engineer, and a guardian, and he had just identified the primary source of instability in his system. "High Pontiff Vale," he said, addressing the now unfrozen but deeply shaken Cathal leader, "your species is driven by faith, a commendable if inefficient social cohesion matrix, but your faith is based on a flawed premise. You believe we are perfect. You are, therefore, a danger to yourselves and to the Conclave. You are, at this moment, mobilizing your correction fleet to attack the Sol system, an act of such profound, suicidal stupidity that I am at a loss for a proper metaphor," Vael sputtered. Our faith demands we—" "Your faith," Thorne interrupted, his voice now devoid of all patience, "demands you listen. You will stand down your fleet. Now." The Cathal Pontiff stared, his reptilian eyes wide with a mixture of rage and terror. And if we refuse?" Thorne simply tapped the air. The holographic display of the galaxy, the one from his ship, now appeared in the conclave chamber, replacing all other images. It showed the Cathal homeworld, Cathalos. And then, it showed the entire Cathal correction fleet, their most powerful, most sacred armada, which was at that very moment massing in their home orbit. "This is your fleet, Pontiff," Thorne said. "And this," he said, as a small silver teardrop-shaped icon, the messenger, appeared above them, "is my ship. I am in your home system. I have been for the last 5 minutes." A new real-time image appeared. It was a view from the messenger, looking down at Vale's flagship. "My Triumvirate, Dr. Aris Thorne, is currently running a deep resonance scan on your primary power grid. He informs me that the harmonic frequency of your central planetary power matrix is unstable. A single, focused, counter-resonant pulse from my auxiliary drive, the one for the lights, would be sufficient to shatter your entire planetary power grid permanently." He paused. "I am not threatening you, Pontiff. I am grading you. You have failed the test of do not start a holy war with your ancestors. You will stand down your fleet. You will return to your homeworld. And you will study." Vael, his entire civilization held hostage by a single, tiny silver ship that had just appeared in his fortified sacred home orbit, had no choice. The logical, military, and spiritual superiority was absolute. He and the entire Cathal delegation simply, silently, vanished from the conclave, their connections severed, their minds racing to deal with the god who was now holding a gun to their entire planet's head. Thorne turned to the remaining trembling delegates. "Now," he said, his voice softening slightly like a father turning from a problem child to his more promising, if still slow, students. "That is the bad news. The good news is your conclave is no longer burdened by dogma. We can begin the real work. Captain Xyla, you and your gnarl scientist have access to the data packet I provided. Xyla, who had been watching this entire, terrifying exchange, found her voice. Warden-Primus, the patch. We have analyzed it. It is impossible. The physics, the mathematics, it is beyond us. We cannot build it. She looked down, a feeling of profound, species-wide shame washing over her. They had been given their first true adult test, and they had failed. The chamber was silent, the younger races awaiting the judgment of their ancestor. Elias Thorne looked at her, and for the first time, his face softened. The cold, analytical gaze was replaced by something else. A flicker of pride. Captain Xyla, he said, the test was not whether you could build it, we knew you couldn't. The test was whether you would be honest enough to admit it. He smiled, a true, warm, and deeply human smile. You have failed to master our technology, but you have, in this single, honest moment, mastered the first and most important lesson of any true civilization: humility. You have acknowledged your limitations. You have asked for help. Congratulations, Captain. Your species, the Velani, and your gnarl allies, you have just passed the test. Your real review, your education, can now begin. The Firstborn, it turned out, were not just engineers. They were the most terrifyingly patient and demanding teachers in the universe. In the weeks that followed what became known as the Great Admonishment, the galaxy was transformed. The Cathal, humbled, silent, and terrified, had retreated to their homeworld, their correction fleet now parked in a permanent, stationary, honorary guard around the messenger, which Elias Thorne had left in their orbit as a permanent adjunct. Professor. The rest of the conclave, led by a newly promoted and deeply overwhelmed Chancellor Xyla, was now in session. But it was no longer a session of debate. It was a lecture. From the messenger, Warden-Primus Thorne, General Rostova, and Dr. Thorne, began the arduous, painstaking, and often deeply condescending process of uplifting the younger races. Their first act was to fix the leaky FTL drives. But they did not simply give them the technology. No, Dr. Aris Thorne said, in his first galaxy-wide pedagogical broadcast, to give you the solution is to treat you as pets. We are here to treat you as students. You will learn, he began, with the basics, not transdimensional physics. He began with mathematics. He explained that their entire clumsy, binary-based digital computing system was a dead end. He introduced them to the principles of quantum lattice computing, the analog thought engine that powered the progenitor's own superior systems. The Gnarl, the galaxy's supposed logicians, were thrown into a state of collective, ecstatic, intellectual turmoil. Their greatest minds, their planet-spanning AIs were, as Aris gently explained, clever abacuses, and nothing more. While Aris taught the scientists, General Eva Rostova, the Defense Triumvirate, began her own separate consultation. She summoned the fleet commanders of the younger races, including a humbled Xyla, to the Agamemnon, the newly awakened firstborn dreadnought that had emerged from the lunar armory. The Agamemnon, a single gray shark-like vessel, was 5 miles long, and it made Xyla's flagship look like a child's toy. Rostova did not lecture them on honor or faith. She lectured them on efficiency. Your fleets are a tactical nightmare, she said, her voice a flat iron clip as she strode before them in the vast, functional gray hangar bay. You rely on shields. Shields are a failure point. They are a passive defense. You are waiting to be hit. She showed them the Agamemnon's defense, a point singularity impedance field. The ship did not block an incoming weapon. It bent space-time around it, causing the weapon to simply, harmlessly, travel into an alternate, irrelevant dimension. This, she said, is proper defense. This is active defense. Your ships are targets. Ours are concepts. She then showed them her weapons. They had no lasers, no plasma. Energy is inefficient, she stated. It diffuses. We use kinetics, but we do not use them as you do. She showed them a temporal shell. It was not a bullet. It was a device that, when it hit an enemy ship, did not explode. It aged it. It surrounded the target in a temporal stasis field and accelerated its internal timeline by 5 million years in the space of a single second. The younger races watched, in mute existential horror, as a decommissioned asteroid, their test target, did not explode but simply rusted, decayed, and crumbled into dust in an instant. This, the progenitors explained, was a humane weapon. It did not kill the crew, just the ship. Elias Thorne, the Warden-Primus, oversaw it all. His was the hardest job, managing the cultural impact. He was the parent who had returned home to find his children had built a civilization based on a misreading of his own 100,000-year-old grocery list. He had to gently and firmly re-educate them. He had to explain that the holy mountain on Cathalos was not a god, it was a slag heap, the exhausted remains of one of their old, terraforming engines' foundries. He had to explain that the cosmic hum was not the voice of the ancestors, it was the power grid for the Martian cryovaults. He was single-handedly dismantling 100 millennia of galactic religion and replacing it with engineering. The younger races, stripped of their myths, their gods, and their pride, were left with a single, terrible, and wonderful truth. They were not alone. They were not the masters of the universe. They were, in fact, still in school. And the teachers were back. And the homework was going to be hell. The long morning was over. And the long, hard lesson had just begun. The galaxy, for the first time in 100 millennia, had homework. The great admonishment, as the younger race's historians were already calling Elias Thorne's intervention at the conclave, had sent a shockwave of profound, species-wide identity crisis through every civilized system. The Cathal, their entire society built on the bedrock of a faith that was now proven to be a typographical error, were the most visibly shattered. High Pontiff Viel, in a public galaxy-wide broadcast from his home system, under the watchful, silent orbital gaze of the messenger, had formally recanted the Vakor as a divine text. He had redesignated it as a historical, Firstborn adjacent document, a flawed primitive attempt to understand the incomprehensible. This act of profound public humility, forced upon him by Thorne's cold logic, had triggered a crisis of faith across his empire. The Cathal ascendancy, a rigid, disciplined, and unified civilization, was now adrift, its citizens grappling with the terrifying, anarchic, and suddenly human concept of a universe without absolute divine law. But the Firstborn did not just break things, they rebuilt. Dr. Aris Thorne, the xenosociologist of the progenitor Triumvirate, took personal charge of the Cathal re-education. He did not offer them a new religion. He offered them something far more challenging, philosophy. He transmitted the full unedited and deeply contradictory library of human thought. The Cathal, a species that had only ever known a single unified text, were suddenly inundated with Plato, with Nietzsche, with Sun Tzu, with Locke. They were forced to debate. Their brightest minds, once holy pontiffs, were now enrolled in a forced, remote introductory level ethics course, and their new, ancient human professor was a ruthless grader. They were being taught not what to think, but how to think. A process they found agonizing, insulting, and, in the deepest, most secret parts of their minds, exhilarating. They were, for the first time, being treated not as servants, but as students, and their potential for growth, as Aris noted in his log, was promising, if very loud. For Captain Xyla and her Velani people, the challenge was different. They were not dogmatic, they were pragmatic. And they were now the apprentices of the galaxy's greatest and most terrifying engineer, General Eva Rostova. Rostova had turned the Agamemnon, the massive gray Firstborn dreadnought, into a mobile University of Applied Physics. Xyla and Tikuk, the gnarl scientist, found themselves in a class of the younger race's brightest scientific minds, all struggling and failing to comprehend the most basic principles of progenitor technology. Your entire FTL system, Rostova's voice, flat and unimpressed, echoed through the lecture bay, is a cargo cult interpretation of our old relic alpha jump drives. You have, in essence, figured out how to make a spark by banging two very complex, very volatile rocks together. You have no understanding of the fire. She showed them the mathematics of the human K-drive, the controlled singularity engine. Takak, a being whose mind was a biological supercomputer, stared at the equations and felt for the first time in his life the sensation of humility. The math was not digital. It was not a binary yes or no equation. It was conceptual. It was intuitive. You are trying to calculate the jump, Rostova explained, pointing to Tikak's frantic, failing simulations. You cannot calculate a trans-dimensional fold. You must feel it. Our engines are not machines. They are extensions of a sentient quantum lattice AI. You must learn to harmonize with the math, not just solve it. You have been building very clever calculators. We are going to teach you how to build a mind. The younger races were being, forcibly and painfully, dragged from their own comfortable technological plateau and shown the sheer, terrifying mountain that lay beyond. They were learning not just that their gods were flesh, but that their science was in fact magic, and they were just now learning how to spell. The Great Uplift, as the period came to be known, was not a gentle, benevolent process. It was a stressful, frantic, and destabilizing cram session. The progenitors were not patient. Elias Thorne, the Warden-Primus, drove the conclave with a relentless, demanding, and almost desperate urgency. He pushed the younger races, demanding they absorb, integrate, and innovate at a pace their societies were not built for. He gave the Gnarl a 5-year deadline to produce a functional, stable, quantum lattice AI. He tasked the Velani with retrofitting their entire fleet with the new active temporal impedance shielding. He even gave the Cathal in their philosophical prisons a new, impossible project: devise a new, secular, species-wide code of ethics that could unify their fractured civilization without resorting to divine mandate. Chancellor Xyla, who now led the conclave, finally, in a moment of profound frustration, confronted Elias. She found him not on a grand command bridge, but in a simple, quiet observation room on the Messenger, staring at the vast, holographic, real-time map of the galaxy. Warden-Primus, Elias, she said, her voice a respectful but strained chime. You are breaking us. My people are in chaos. The Cathal are on the verge of a civil war. The Gnarl's logic systems are failing under the strain. Why? Why are you pushing us so hard? You are gods. You are home. You have all the time in the universe. Elias Thorne turned from the map, his ancient human eyes filled with a weariness that was deeper than any ocean. No, Chancellor, he said, his voice quiet. We don't. He looked back at the map, at the vast, silent, unexplored black gulf of intergalactic space, the void between the arms of their own galaxy. He pointed. We did not go to sleep for 100,000 years just to let you mature, Xyla. That was a partial truth. We did not build the quarantine of Sol just to protect our tomb. We built it to hide. He zoomed the map in, not on a star, but on a patch of pure, empty, and perfect blackness. Ariadne, he said. Designate Anomaly Prime, the static dissonance. On the map, a faint, terrifying something flickered. It was not a fleet. It was not a world. It was a shadow. A vast, nebulous, and mathematically wrong patch of space, moving with a slow, relentless, and predatory intelligence between the galaxies. Your ancestors, the very first progenitors, Elias said, were loud. When we first ignited our FTL drives, when we first sang our song of civilization into the cosmos, we attracted attention, not from in the galaxy but from outside. He explained. The static, the great dissonance, was a form of life they could not comprehend. It was not biological, it was not digital, it was a conceptual predator, a form of sentient psychic entropy that heard the complex coherent signals of advanced, networked civilizations and fed on them. It did not conquer, it erased. It was the Great Filter personified. We were not strong enough to fight it, Elias whispered. We were too few, too alone. Our entire civilization, a mononote in the cosmic symphony, was a beacon, a dinner bell. So we did the only thing we could. We faked our own death. We set the long morning protocol. We went to sleep and we hid, praying that when we awoke, the galaxy would no longer be a single tempting solo performance. We prayed that it would be a choir. Xyla stared, her blood running cold. A choir? The static hunts coherence, Elias said. It hunts a single, simple harmonic signal. It cannot process, it cannot feed on cacophony, on dissonance, on the chaotic, overlapping, messy, and beautiful noise of 1,000 different species, all singing a different song, all at the same time. We didn't uplift you to be our students. We uplifted you to be our shield, our colleagues, our allies. We needed you to be as strong as us, as smart as us, and as numerous as us because he tapped the map. The shadow, the static, was no longer moving in the intergalactic void. It had heard the new, loud, combined song of the Conclave and the returned Firstborn. It had tasted their signal. Because, Elias concluded, his voice a grim, final call to arms, it has found us. And it is, as of this moment, coming. The great uplift is over, Chancellor. The final exam has just begun. The enemy did not arrive like a fleet. It arrived like a stain. A creeping, silent wrongness that began at the edge of the galaxy and moved inward, not at FTL speed, but at the speed of despair. It was a null field, a static dissonance, that simply and quietly erased coherence. A star system, as it was enveloped, did not explode. Its sun just simplified, its complex fusion-based light becoming a dull, single-frequency red glow. Planets did not shatter. Their orbits just decayed, their complex gravitational dance unraveling. And the minds of the living, the minds were the true feast. Any networked, advanced, coherent civilization it touched was silenced. Their thoughts, their art, their science, their very consciousness, it was all harmonized down to a single placid zero-point hum. It was the predator of complexity. It was the god of entropy. The combined fleets of the galaxy, the 10,000 ship-strong, ancient, human First Fleet, and the 50,000 new, clumsy, but varied ships of the younger races, massed at the edge of the Cygnus Arm, the designated firewall. This was where they would make their stand. The Firstborn, the human fleet, took the center. General Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the Agamemnon, her face a mask of cold, analytical human fury. "All First Fleet vessels," she commanded, her voice broadcast across the most powerful armada in galactic history. "Weapon status temporal shells fully charged. We will fire a single, unified cleansing volley. We will age this thing to the heat death of the universe." The static entered their range. It was a visible, roiling black cloud in space, a patch of void that was darker than the void itself. "Fire," Rostova commanded. 1,000 Firstborn dreadnoughts, in perfect, terrible unison, unleashed their ultimate weapon, a wave of pure, temporal disruption energy, 1,000,000 years of decay accelerated into a single, devastating instant, washed over the static. The static did not slow. It did not change. It did not age. The temporal shells passed through it, as if it were not there at all. Rostova stared, her ironclad composure shattering. "Analysis. Now." The report came back from Dr. Aris Thorne, his own scientific mind reeling. "General, it's not in our timeline. It's non-temporal. It's not a physical object. It's a conceptual one. A mathematical absolute. It's the concept of zero, and it's coming to erase the equation. Our weapons, they are irrelevant." The static washed over the first, forward scout wing of the First Fleet. The 5 gray, shark-like ships did not explode, they just stopped. Their K-drives went cold, their lights went out. Ariadne's link to them vanished. The crews inside, the 100,000-year-old reintegrated human soldiers, were gone. Their consciousnesses had been harmonized, silenced. The Firstborn, the gods of the galaxy, the most powerful physical force in the cosmos, were useless. Their 100,000-year-old plan, their ultimate physical-based defense, had failed. The static was unstoppable. It was coming for them all. The Conclave fleet, the ships of the younger races, was in a state of absolute species-wide panic. Their gods, their teachers, their all-powerful ancestors in one were failing. The static was rolling toward them, a wave of pure conceptual death. It's a mono-note, Tikik, the Gnarl scientist, shrieked, his antennae vibrating with terror. I see it. Ariadne is feeding me the data. It's an anti-consciousness field tuned to a single perfect zero-point frequency. It is the sound of ultimate logical perfect silence. He was babbling, his mind breaking. But Xyla, the Velani chancellor, heard the word. Mononote. Single. Silence. She looked at her own, clumsy, Velani ship, its FTL drive, leaking, chaotic, subspace static. She looked at the Cathal ships, their comm systems broadcasting their newly learned contradictory philosophical arguments. She looked at the Gnarl ships, their engines humming with the off-key experimental frequencies of their new, unstable quantum lattice prototypes. They were not a single, perfect, coherent fleet. They were a mess. They were a noise. That's it, she shrieked, her own avian mind, a creature of instinct and adaptation, seeing the one, single, illogical solution. Elias, Warden-Primus Thorne, your fleet, it's too perfect, it's too coherent, it's a single harmonic note. You are feeding it, you are attracting it. On the bridge of the messenger, Elias Thorne, his face pale, his mind reeling from the loss of his scout ships, heard her. He processed the logic. It was insane. It was chaotic. It was right. All Firstborn vessels, he roared, in his own ancient, human, panicked voice. Power down. Go silent. Go dark. Kill your coherence. The entire magnificent 10,000 ship, First Fleet vanished, their engines, their shields, their very presence shutting down, becoming cold, dead, metal, a desperate attempt to hide. The static, its primary coherent Firstborn meal suddenly gone, faltered. The great black rolling cloud of death paused, confused, its single zero-point note wavering as if sniffing the air for a new sound. It found it. The 50,000 leaky, chaotic, dissonant ships of the younger races. They were not a single, pure note. They were a cacophony, a noise. The static turned its attention to them, a predator choosing a new, albeit messy, meal. It's coming for us, the Cathal commander screamed. We are lost. No, we're not, Xyla yelled, her voice now the command voice of the entire Allied fleet. We are not a meal, we are poison. She turned to Thorne's dark, silent icon on her screen. Warden-Primus, we are too quiet. Your ships, we need your power, not your coherence, not your weapons, your reactors. Give us your power, all of it. Elias understood. It was the most insane, beautiful, and human idea he had ever heard. Ariadne. Reroute all K-drives, all zero-point manifolds, purge all power not as a weapon but as a current. Channel it into the younger race's ships. The universe changed. The 10,000 dead Firstborn ships suddenly shone, not with weapons but as suns, pouring their godlike infinite zero-point energy, not at the enemy, but into their allies. The 50,000 clumsy younger race ships were supercharged. Their leaky engines became geysers of raw, chaotic FTL static. Their crude comm systems became supernovas of broadcast noise. Their new, experimental, unstable quantum drives screamed a million different contradictory mathematical songs. Xyla, her ship's systems glowing, overloaded, and on the verge of melting, gave her last command. "Sing," she screamed. "Sing everything. Broadcast your art, your music, your philosophies, your anger, your fear. Be loud, be chaotic, be dissonant, be alive." The static, the predator of perfect logical coherence, was struck by a tidal wave of pure conceptual chaos. It was hit by Velani opera, by Cathal legal arguments, by gnarled mathematical paradoxes, all amplified to the power of a god. It was a billion different, contradictory, messy notes, all sung at once. The perfect single mononote of the static could not process the cacophony. It was not a weapon, it was noise, it was life. The black, silent, creeping shadow of the static tore apart. It shattered. It fled, not as a unified force, but as a million tiny, screaming, defeated echoes, running back into the intergalactic dark, its perfect, logical mind broken by the one thing it could not ever comprehend: the messy, beautiful, and terrible sound of life. On the bridge of the messenger, Elias Thorne watched the static flee. He looked at the glowing, chaotic, and triumphant fleet of the younger races. He looked at his own, dark, quiet, and now obsolete firstborn ships. His 100,000-year-old plan had failed, and in its failure, it had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He had not created an army to fight the dark. He had created a choir, and their song was the most beautiful and most terrible sound in the universe. The long morning was over. The firstborn were no longer the teachers, no longer the parents. They were just the baseline, and the true galactic and utterly chaotic symphony had just begun.